have with us Professor Mike Woldemariam. Mike is a professor with us here at the Pardee School of Global Studies, and we're going to ask him what he thinks the future of Africa might look like in a post-COVID world.
Whether or not the health crisis does really explode in Africa or across African countries in the way that it has in Europe, for instance, I think the economic problems associated with COVID-19 are to some extent already baked in and will be long lasting. There are other shocks on the horizon that will make the economic situation worse. I mean, other crises in Africa and around the world don't take a break. I'll give you a couple examples. In East Africa right now, we are on the verge of seeing the worst locusts that region has seen in 70 years. That'll actually dwarf COVID in terms of actual impact in this part of the African continent, although that is somewhat speculative. Issues of water security, long-running issues of water insecurity, recurring drought in the Horn and the Sahel, concerns over another possible Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. And then there are, of course, man-made disasters like armed conflict. I mean, recent conflict trends in armed conflict trends in the Sahel, for instance, are really quite worrying. I think the political fallout across Africa will really depend on the particular countries we're talking about. I really see three possibilities, right? I mean, the first possibility is really a story of sort of maybe a more optimistic story of sort of political and institutional resilience, particular African countries that have faced shocks before, that are able to deal with the political fallout of severe and acute economic crisis and kind of ride this out. I think the second possible scenario is in African countries where we have sort of fledgling sort of processes of democratization, real sort of backsliding on democratic institution building or the promise of democracy in a particular African country. Already, we've seen a number of African countries that have suspended elections, forthcoming elections in 2020, Ethiopia being one of them. And I can promise you, I can guarantee you that there will be many more countries in 2020 that do suspend their elections. But there is a broader concern that incumbent regimes will use the politics of emergency and crisis to solidify their power and subvert democratic safeguards. And I think that the third scenario is really in the most politically fragile context in Africa, that the COVID-19 crisis really pushes these political systems over the edge and the state sort of collapses in on itself.
Any thoughts on intra-African politics, regional politics in Africa?
I think a lot here depends on Africa's ability to advocate for itself on the world stage and navigate this economic turmoil. And I would say here, I think we're seeing some interesting and I would say positive signs, because I think as the world retreats from multilateralism, we are seeing key African states really rally behind an African multilateralism centered around the AU and the regional economic communities. Obviously, multilateralism in Africa is a work in progress, but if you look at the long historical arc of African multilateralism as it's evolved since the end of the Cold War, crises tend to kind of provoke sort of periods of rapid progress and activity when it comes to building a genuine functioning African multilateralism.
How do you think geopolitics or geoeconomics is playing or will play into the future of Africa in a post-COVID world?
Africa's economic trouble will in part be shaped by demand-side considerations in Europe, the industrialized world, and China. I think the other issue is really the sort of geopolitical moment we're in the contest between the United States and China. And COVID-19 has been a key terrain in which this geopolitical battle is being fought. For instance, the recent back and forth about the WHO and its performance, there seemed to be a consistency or an alignment of narratives between China and African countries. On the other hand, we are seeing, given the treatment of some of Africans, a large number of Africans that live in China, accusations of racism and maltreatment of some Africans, we are seeing African countries very publicly sort of stand up and critique the Chinese government, demand a response and some restitution. And so I think the geopolitical game is playing out and will play out over the course of the next decade. And COVID-19 is perhaps, you could almost see it as an inflection point in that particular dynamic.